Hi, I'm Tommy. Welcome to another episode of PhotoTips. Well, this isn't exactly what I planned on doing my episode this month, but seeing as how I woke up and all of a sudden it decided it was going to be winter, it seemed like a great opportunity to do a segment on digital photography or photography in general and cold weather conditions. Let's go right on into it. The main thing that we need to worry about for your camera is the power source. I would recommend two batteries. If you saw last month's episode and you saw the star trail pictures that I did, it was about 20 degrees that night, which for a lot of places in the country that's pretty mild for coldness. Anyway, the one long exposure completely drained one of my batteries. Luckily I had another one. I keep it on the inside of my pocket, on the inside pocket next to my body, so the body heat can keep it warm. The first battery wasn't completely dead. Once I warmed it back up, it came back up to a full charge. So it's important to have two batteries if you want to continue shooting in the cold weather, or at least take your battery out and warm it up often. But anyway, what I do is keep one next to my body, keep it warm, and swap it with the one that's been in the camera that gets cold when it starts to look like it's going down. And you can shoot for a pretty good while like that. The other thing we need to be concerned with is if it's snowy like it is now, you may have an exposure problem. If you remember back on one of the first episodes of PhotoTips, we discussed basic. One of the other problems is if it's snowy weather, you need to be careful about your exposure. If you remember back, or go back and view one of the previous episodes, I believe it may have been in the second one of PhotoTips, we discussed basic exposure and exposure compensation. For a refresher, exposure compensation is basically either letting in more light or decreasing the amount of light to adjust your exposure based on the reflectance of the scenery. If you remember, the camera's meter adjusts your scene to be 18% gray, so your snow is going to come out gray instead of white. To get white snow, you would let more light in. Average one third to 2/3 stop, depending on the rest of your scenery. We've got some trees in the background and so forth, so it wouldn't take quite as much. There's not a hard fast rule about that. 2/3 or so is a good starting point. Take your picture, check the histogram. That goes back to another episode of PhotoTips. We discussed checking your exposure using the histogram. Anyway, it's a lot of opportunities for some great photos when it's snowy like this. Let's take a look at a few samples that I took, and let's discuss the exposure compensation and the results from it. Okay, well, let's start off with the first sample. This one is just a straight exposure. The camera determined the exposure by itself and no compensation was used. As you can see, the snow is pretty gray. Let's move up to the next one where I increased the exposure by 1/3 of a stop. Yeah, that's much better, but still not quite there. Let's go 2/3 of a stop. And this to me is pretty well right on the money, because there's some shadows and brightness in there. You've still got texture in the white part of the snow. And I went ahead and took one full stop of exposure compensation added. And you can see there's a lot of detail in the trees, but the areas of the snow where the sun are hitting, there's no detail left. So that's a tad overexposed. The 2/3 exposure, additional exposure seemed to be right on the money to me. Okay, let's review our cold weather tips. Number one, be sure to check your exposure when you have a snowy scene. Use your histogram when you preview, and if your histogram is bunched up to the left or to the right, your exposure is definitely off. Carry plenty of batteries and keep them warm. Any batteries that you're not using at the time, keep them in a pocket near your body, so your body heat will keep them warm, and you should have batteries last for quite a while. And one that we didn't mention earlier was, if you're coming in and out of the cold weather and your gear is cold, when you hit that warm room, condensation is going to form on your lens and your circuitry of your camera, and that's not good for your equipment. So one way to keep that from happening is to put your camera in a Ziploc bag and seal it up and bring it on in until it warms up to room temperature, and then it's safe to take it out without causing any problems. Well, as you can see, it makes a big difference when you adjust your exposure based on the scenery. The 2/3 is good. I had a lot of dark areas in that scene as well, so it's not the same as taking a picture of just a plain blanket of snow, which you normally wouldn't do that anyways. I tried to choose samples that were basically a real world condition. Anyway, there's no substitute for experience, so get out, take some pictures, have a good time. If you want to share some, maybe send them to me, tmartin@amateurlogic.tv, and if we can, we'll try to put a few on, show some of them related to some of the photo tips that we've done in the past. If you can tell me which photo tip you picked up the tip from and used it in some of your photography, I'd like to share that with some of the other viewers. As always, if you have any comments or questions, tmartin@amateurlogic.tv. I want to thank all the viewers that sent all the email in from the last episode. The long exposure photo tip episode was obviously a big hit, and we've got some more fun stuff like that coming up. I'd hope to do something different this month, but the snow came a little unexpected, and I hated to miss the opportunity on that. So anyway, get out, take some pictures, and have some fun. And anyway, let me know if you want to share some on the photo tips episode in an upcoming one. I'll see you next time.